Welcome to my first YouTube video where I will be creating a festive outfit for my Sphynx cat. My starting point for this project was a simplicity sewing pattern made for dogs. However, the size of this was rather large even in a small. And because I like to be sustainable in my practice, I chose to upcycle some old children's pyjamas that I found in a Kirkwood Hospice charity shop. Also, the pattern number is 8824 Simplicity for anybody that feels inspired by this project and would like to do their own. As you can see, all the pattern pieces are clearly labelled and sized. When I do buy these commercial patterns, I like to trace off the pieces as I find it more sustainable and the pattern actually lasts longer. Apologies about the camera moving though. Once I'd cut the original pattern, I retraced it again, and then I actually had my Sphynx's measurements because the size small was still way too big for him. So I then redrew the pattern but to his measurements, adapting the pieces and making them smaller. This was actually a challenge for me as I do have an undergraduate in fashion design and manufacture. However, I've only ever made human clothes. So this was a challenge even for me as it was technical with it being very small. Even though this is a longer process and it does make the process as a whole a little bit more tedious, I find that it gives me extra pattern sizes. So then when he grows, I can just use the size small rather than having to use this. It's just a way that I work. I find it more sustainable for my practice, and I actually enjoy working like this as it gives me multiples of the same pattern in different sizes. Once I adapted the pieces, I then had to cut them out as we had to make sure that they fit together properly. So I was creating something called a toile, which is made out of cheap fabric, and it's just basically to check the fit of your pattern to make sure it fits correctly really. As I mentioned, we use cheap fabric for toiling, so I decided to take one of my daughter's old t-shirts. She doesn't know about this, but I wake up every day and choose violence, so why not? Here I'm just cutting around the seams, so I'm getting as much fabric from the actual garment as possible. With this being a double XL men's top, there was quite a lot of material here to work with, as they were quite sizable pieces once I'd cut around all the seams of like the sleeves and the neckline. And there's Clarence. Once I'd cut up the t-shirt, I used the back as the fabric for this toile, and I folded it in half as some of the pieces needed to be placed on a fold for the cutting rather than cutting two of them and them having a seam up the middle. So I decided to use this back piece as it was a nice big piece, also quite square enough to be able to lay the pattern pieces out properly. However, garment tech people, please don't come for me. This was an upcycling project and I'm trying to be sustainable here. If this was a project where I was creating it from brand new fabric, I would be checking my grain lines. However, with it just being a little upcycling project, I've just done it this way as it's more sustainable for me to do this and create a little craft piece rather than going out to buy fabric just to be able to make a toile. I did end up pinning and cutting the cuffs and the collar for this, I don't know why I did this. I didn't need to do this for the toile. It was only really the body components of the front, the back and the sleeves that I needed to check fitted together. I knew that these would be okay, but for some reason I just ended up pinning it, and yeah, I don't know why. And here's the bird's eye view of my lay plan. Once all the pieces were pinned, it was time to cut the pieces out. And the best bit of advice I ever got in art school off my fashion lecturers, one of them was to rest the bottom of your shears on the actual table as you're cutting. However, I know I am trimming some of these in the actual air as I'm holding them. However, when you cut the pieces out, resting the bottom of your shears on the actual table, it just gives you so much more stability. The pattern and the fabric doesn't slip, so you don't end up cutting chunks out and having to then repin it and recut again. It just saves a lot of time and effort if you can just rest the bottom of your shears on the table as you're cutting. And as you can see, as I cut out this last piece, the excess and waste is very minimal from that piece of fabric. This is good as it makes the process more sustainable. Once the toile pieces were cut, it was time to sew them. However, this process was a little different to what I'm used to, as the commercial pattern sewing instructions instructed me to attach the front and back piece to each sleeve and then do the seam of the sleeve along with the side seams of the garment. Obviously I didn't add the trims like the cuffs and the collar, as this was just a toile. However, I do actually quite like how this has turned out, considering I've only ever made human clothes, so this was still a learning process for me, even though I do have qualifications in fashion. Once the toile was sewn, I then needed to get Clarence for a toile fitting. However, to make him still enough in front of the camera, I had to use treats as bait so I could check the fit whilst he stayed still. My daughter found this hilarious. She thought it looked like a Victorian undershirt, and that Clarence was some kind of peasant boy. As I was genuinely happy with the fit of this, all I needed to do was make the neck hole a little wider. Now it was time to cut up the thrifted pieces for this actual project. As this was only a child's 1 to 2 year old t-shirt, there was only enough fabric to create the front and back pieces, or else I would have created it all out of this one piece. So I used the second garment, which were pyjama bottoms, as the sleeve. I also reused the cuffs off the bottom of them. I then used some ribbon material that I actually had to buy to create the waistband and the collar, as I used the cuffs off the pyjamas for the sleeve cuffs for this project. Then it was time to sew the final pieces together. So I started with my front, back and sleeves. Also, I pre-pressed the ribbon for the waistband and the collar off camera, so it was already going to have a nice fit. And I had to actually adjust the cuffs off the pyjama bottoms so they were the right width. And honestly, that was the only thing that I really struggled with, was attaching those cuffs, as they were so small. I couldn't fit them round the machine. and yeah, it led to a couple of mistakes, but I could soon rectify them. It was much easier to sew the waistband. In total, it only took me about an hour. As I put so much effort into this project, I decided to create a Christmas themed photo shoot to go with it, to be able to style it, as I was actually qualified in photography before I was qualified in fashion. So I thought, let's have a little bit of fun, and this is how it turned out. Here's Clarence on set with his festive outfit. And here's how some of the final pictures came out. He's looking like a Bobby Dazzler in that festive outfit, if I do say so myself. And if you like this type of content, don't forget to like, drop a comment and subscribe.